It was late on Friday night, July 14th, 2017, 11:45 p.m. on Bradford's Lum Lane. The streets were almost deserted, street lamps glowing dimly over empty pavements. Yet one thing remained active. A phone line that never seemed to rest. Calls came through endlessly, day and night, without pause. At the same time, miles away in Manchester, a family home held a hidden secret. Behind a wardrobe door, inside metal tins, a different type of business was quietly taking place. And not far off, in a basement in Bradford, detectives would eventually discover a container so cleverly disguised that when the valve was turned, actual gas hissed out. These may sound like three separate stories, but they were all linked by a single thread: the illicit drug trade that spread through the streets of the UK. This is the tale of the Bradford Sully line, a Manchester couple and a cocaine canister, and how law enforcement eventually brought them down. Welcome to Truth Unraveled. Let's dive straight into this case. The Sully line first appeared in 2012, almost unnoticed. At its simplest, it was just a phone number, but slowly it became Bradford's most reliable connection for heroin and crack cocaine. The hub of this line was in Manningham, specifically Lum Lane, an area that already had a reputation among police for drug-related activity. From here, the operation expanded, becoming one of the most dominant supply networks in the city, shaping Bradford's drug scene for years. The method was simple but efficient. Investigators later described it as a ring and bring model. Customers called the line, placed an order, and within minutes a courier was dispatched to deliver. No names, no formal meetings, just a quick call, a brief exchange, and the deal was done. For addicts, it was dependable. For those running the operation, it was built to operate 24/7 without interruption. At the head of the organization were three men, acting like directors of a company. Each had responsibilities, but together they made sure the line kept running smoothly. Mohammed Ayaz from Undercliff held a key organizational role. His brother Mohammed Hassan worked closely alongside him, the two siblings strengthening the leadership together. With them was Tasawir Alam, a trusted associate who made up the third leader. They created a system of rotating management. One handled the daytime operations, another the nights. This didn't mean they personally sat by the phone all the time. Their job was broader, ensuring supply flowed, the dealers were ready, and the chain never stopped. This rotation gave the Sully line structure and resilience. By 2017, it wasn't just a phone number anymore. It was essentially a business, and its market was Bradford. No business runs on leadership alone. Beneath the directors was a chain of trusted workers who kept things moving. Amir Rahman was known as the storeman. Living on Lum Lane itself, he stored the stock, heroin and crack ready to be sold. His house became a mini warehouse. For his role, he was paid a steady wage, hundreds of pounds every week. Shiraz Mahmood was responsible for the phone line itself. His work wasn't physical, but technical. He handled SIM card swaps, diverted calls, and ensured that whenever one number was compromised, a new one was ready. His role was crucial. Without an active phone line, the Sully network would collapse. Below them were the street dealers, the faces that directly handed drugs to users. Harim Hussain, still a teenager at the time, delivered orders around Bradford. She was often driven by Mohammed Khan, who acted as her driver. Others included Mohammed Zahed from Leeds and Mohammed Asfan from Bradford. Even unlikely individuals like David Coates, a former soldier, and Malachi Hodgson, a young footballer with a promising future, were pulled into the network. This pyramid-like structure was clear. The directors on top, logistics in the middle, and street dealers at the bottom making the final hand-to-hand exchanges. The Sully line ran constantly, processing hundreds of calls and orders daily. Between July 2017 and August 2018, detectives later counted 229,000 calls linked to the line. At first, the traffic might have looked like ordinary phone usage, but in Manningham, the activity was far too intense to ignore. Local residents began reporting the suspicious level of constant movement in and out of Lum Lane. Police attention soon turned to call data. What they discovered was a pattern. Endless, short calls, many from phone boxes, all linking back to the Sully line. Even though the group thought they were being clever, swapping SIMs, diverting calls, their very attempts to hide made them stand out. Mahmoud's technical maneuvers didn't erase the footprint, they highlighted it. The network had built itself to appear untouchable, but by the end of 2017, law enforcement had already placed them in their sights. Dismantling the Sully line wasn't going to be easy. West Yorkshire Police's organised crime unit knew they weren't dealing with small-time dealers. This was a structured, layered organisation. The first step was surveillance. Officers monitored Lum Lane, watching the steady flow of couriers, cars and foot traffic. They mapped how calls from the Sully line translated into drugs moving from storage houses to dealers and finally to users. Phones and SIM cards were seized one by one. Each seizure tightened the picture, showing the direct connections from leadership at the top all the way down to street dealers. Raids uncovered stash houses. At Amir Rahman's property, officers discovered significant quantities of heroin and crack, hard proof his house was being used as a warehouse for the line. Every small seizure confirmed a larger truth. The Sully line wasn't random. It was industrial-scale supply. By 2018, police had gathered enough evidence. Coordinated raids brought down the key figures: leaders, storemen, technical operators and street dealers. Along with drugs and cash, officers also seized written records, exposing years of business operations and profits. The operation to take down the Sully line was later praised as methodical and intelligent. It took patience, but in the end, the network was no longer invisible. With arrests made, the stage was set for court. When the Sully line finally reached Bradford Crown Court, the mountain of evidence left little space for defense. Prosecutors presented the seized drugs, phones, SIM cards, and call records that tied the network together. Every role had been traced, from directors to street-level sellers. Judge Jonathan Rose summarized it bluntly. The Sully line was a wicked and greedy business, one that profited from human weakness and had no intention of stopping. He described it as a business that never closed. The harshest punishments fell on the leaders. Mohammed Ayaz, 29, sentenced to 13 years and 2 months. Mohammed Hassan, 26, jailed for 11 years and 4 months. Tasawa Alam, 34, received 10 years. Their trusted lieutenants also faced long terms. Amir Rahman, 28, the storeman, got 8 years and 6 months. Shiraz Mahmoud, 28, attempted to paint himself as living a simple life. In court, he claimed he was unemployed, driving only a second-hand car, and with barely £60 in his bank. He insisted that if he truly was a major dealer, his mortgage would be paid and he'd be living comfortably. But Mahmoud's act didn't last. After testifying, he vanished, using his bail to catch a flight to Islamabad. He never returned for the verdict. Tried in his absence, he was found guilty of conspiracy to supply heroin and crack cocaine. He received 10 years in prison, with investigators later valuing his profits at over £2.5 million. Occasionally, only £74 in cash was seized from him when he was arrested. When he eventually returned to the UK years later, he was immediately detained and handed an extra 4 months for failing to surrender. On the lower tiers, punishments reflected their direct involvement. Harim Hussein, 22, sentenced to 3 years and 9 months. Her driver, Mohammed Khan, 45, received 4 years and 2 months. Mohammed Zahed, 27, jailed for 2 years and 10 months. Mohammed Asfan, 37, 2 years and 2 months. David Coates, 35, the ex-soldier, 4 years. Shahzad Salim, 41, 18 months. Lukman Nazir, 28, convicted on 2 counts and sentenced to 3 years and 6 months. Finally, Malachi Hodgson, 21, the young footballer, admitted his role but was seen by the judge as someone with potential who made a serious mistake. He avoided immediate prison, instead receiving a 16-month suspended sentence with community service and a curfew. Altogether, the Sully Line case resulted in over 80 years of prison time handed down. While Bradford's Sully network was collapsing, a very different case was building in Manchester. Ume No, 37 years old, was a nursery worker and mother of 3. On the surface, her life was ordinary, raising children, working shifts, keeping afloat with a modest income. But behind closed doors, her world was far from normal. She had entered into a relationship with Michael Hassan, nearly 10 years younger than her. Hassan, at 28, already had a reputation. He was known to police as a repeat Class A drug dealer, previously convicted for possession with intent to supply in Bolton. He had served 4 years in prison before meeting Noor. Hassan struggled with addiction and stability. To maintain his lifestyle, he returned to the same trade, dealing heroin and crack cocaine. Their relationship pulled No into his orbit, and what began as love soon turned into active involvement in crime. No's house in Moss Side served as both a family home and, secretly, a hub for Hassan's operation. Her 3 children lived among stashes and hiding places, unaware of the risks around them. She didn't just stand by, she actively helped Hassan expand. Over time, she hired nearly 10 rental cars at a cost of £7,000. These vehicles were used to ferry drugs between Moss Side and Bolton, where Hassan had an established customer base. Meanwhile, No had plans to open a takeaway called Taste Buds. Prosecutors later argued this was intended as a front, a way to launder the profits of the drug business. This case didn't go unnoticed. Greater Manchester Police had already launched Operation Apostle, an initiative aimed at dismantling organised drug supply chains across the city. Intelligence gathered by officers pointed directly to No's address. When the warrant was executed, the picture was crystal clear. Inside her bedroom wardrobe, officers discovered the core of the operation: 403 wraps of crack cocaine, 363 wraps of heroin, bulk quantities of both drugs, ready to be cut into hundreds more deals. The setup included freezer bags, digital scales, and a spoon marked with residue, classic indicators of supply, not personal use. The estimated street value was £73,000 immediately, but if the bulk product was divided further, it could reach £115,000. Phones seized during the raid linked No directly to logistics. Messages revealed she was not just present, but central, organising restocks, coordinating with Hassan, and managing dealers when he was unavailable. Both were arrested and charged with conspiracy to supply heroin and crack cocaine, as well as conspiracy to hide criminal property. At Manchester Crown Court, both entered guilty pleas under the weight of the evidence. Michael Hassan, already marked by his previous convictions, received 6 years and 8 months in prison. This sentence ran concurrently with his earlier term. No, 37, described as confident and fully aware of what she was enabling, was handed 4 years and 1 month. The judge did not accept the idea that she was coerced. Instead, she was seen as an active, willing partner who allowed an operation to flourish under the same roof where her children lived. Unlike the Sully line, which was built as a large pyramid-style business, Hassan and No's setup was smaller, but still significant. What made it particularly shocking was the setting. A family home turned into a supply hub, with children living among the operation. Their downfall showed how drug trafficking could take root in the most ordinary-seeming environments, behind the doors of a nursery worker's house. While Hassan and No's case revealed how an ordinary family home could mask a dangerous supply line, Bradford's next story showed an operation on a completely different scale. One involving high-level concealment and international-style trafficking. This time, it wasn't about constant phone orders or teenagers running raps on the street. It was about bulk cocaine trafficking, with consignments hidden so cleverly that even experienced officers were initially misled. At the center of this case was Faruk Meer, a 44-year-old man already known to the justice system. His previous record included violent disorder, and by the time of this investigation, he had stepped into a far more lucrative arena: Class A drug supply. Meer's base of operations was a property on Cornwall Place in Manningham, Bradford. The location looked like a simple renovation project, but beneath it, something far more sinister was being hidden. Alongside him was Saffraz Latif, 37, another man with a criminal past. Latif had already served 3 years for drug trafficking. In this operation, his role was clear: act as courier, transporting consignments from London to Bradford. Their method displayed planning and sophistication. The drugs weren't carried in simple bags or boxes. Instead, they were hidden inside a gas canister, engineered to deceive. The container had been designed so that when the valve was turned, actual gas hissed out, creating the illusion that it was genuine. This safeguard was meant to throw off suspicion if anyone decided to check. In February 2021, Latif made the journey from London, bringing the canister north. Surveillance teams from West Yorkshire Police followed closely, monitoring every movement. Once in Bradford, investigators watched as Meer removed the canister from the boot of his Audi and carried it into the basement of Cornwall Place. To police, this was the confirmation they needed. The canister wasn't just for storage, it was part of an organized supply chain. Soon after, coordinated raids began. At Cornwall Place, officers located the disguised cylinder beneath a sheet of plywood. When they cut it open, the truth was revealed: 14 kilograms of high-purity cocaine, carefully packed inside. The sophistication of the concealment was striking, but what mattered most was the volume. 14 kilos of cocaine was worth millions once broken down into street-level deals. The search didn't end there. A second property in Whiteways was also targeted. Inside, officers found the equipment that kept the operation running: a banknote counter, a heat sealing machine, an angle grinder used to tamper with containers. In the garden, investigators uncovered something even more dangerous: an 8mm semi-automatic pistol hidden beneath outdoor steps. Alongside it, officers seized a 1/4 kilo of cannabis. The evidence showed not just drug trafficking, but the infrastructure of a sophisticated criminal enterprise, complete with weapons and tools for concealing large consignments. When the case reached Bradford Crown Court, prosecutors laid out the full scope of the operation. Surveillance, physical seizures, and forensic analysis tied both men directly to the drugs and equipment. Faruk Meer, 44, faced the heaviest charges: possession with intent to supply Class A and Class B drugs, plus possession of a prohibited firearm. The court sentenced him to 18 years in prison. Saffraz Latif, 37, was convicted of possession with intent to supply Class A drugs. He was sentenced to 11 years. The judge acknowledged the sophistication of their concealment methods, but made clear that no level of planning could protect them from eventual detection. Taken together, these three investigations, the Sully line, the Manchester couple, and the cocaine canister, show how varied the UK's drug trade can be. The Sully line demonstrated an industrialised ring-and-bring model, built on relentless phone traffic and a clear hierarchy of leadership, logistics, and street-level sellers. It relied on volume and consistency, keeping addicts supplied around the clock. The Manchester case highlighted how personal relationships and family homes could become hubs of supply. It wasn't about massive networks, but about trust, loyalty, and the willingness of individuals to turn ordinary life into cover for criminal activity. The cocaine canister case revealed high-level trafficking, where concealment and engineering were used to disguise shipments worth millions. Unlike the other two, this wasn't retail supply, it was wholesale, aiming to keep the drugs invisible until distribution. Despite their differences, all three operations shared one weakness: patterns. Whether it was constant phone calls, unusual rental car bookings, or suspicious movements captured by surveillance, these traces eventually exposed them. What do you think about these cases and the sentences each of these individuals received? Do you feel justice was served, or should the penalties have been even tougher? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next case on Truth Unraveled.